Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we will read a story about a man whose wife revealed that she was pregnant, but he knew he wasn't the father because he is sterile, but he decides to play along. This is a 2-part story, so be sure to like and subscribe for part 2. Let's get started. I'm 38 male, married to my wife, 33 female for 2 years. We'd been dating for 3 years and she was more inclined towards marriage than I was, but just to make her happy, I agreed to it. Around a year ago, we started trying to have a baby, again at my wife's insistence. We struggled a lot during the period that we were trying to conceive, though when things got so bad for my mental health that I decided to get myself tested. My wife had become mean during the time that we were struggling to conceive, and I tried to deal with her behavior, but it was just too much to bear. So a few days after the test, I was told by the doctors that I was sterile. To be honest, that pretty much broke my heart. Even though having a baby wasn't my idea, I'd started envisioning my life as a father already, and I really wanted to be one. So to learn that I'd never be able to be a dad was the most devastating news to me at the time. But the worst was yet to come. I've been trying to work up the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we weren't able to conceive. But I was afraid of how she'd react. She'd already been so mean to me that I couldn't imagine her reaction when she'd find out that what she wanted was probably never going to happen with me. So I waited for a few days after I knew the results of my test to tell my wife, but she's the one who ended up giving me a surprise. 4 days after I knew that I was sterile, she sat me down and told me that she had some really important news to share with me. I was extremely scared because I thought that she'd somehow found out about my sterility. But no, she wanted to tell me that she was finally pregnant. I was shocked to my very core at what she was saying. But thankfully, she was blissfully unaware of my true feelings and began to celebrate almost immediately. I tried to join in on her happiness so that she wouldn't doubt me or whatever. But the very next day, I got tested again, just to confirm that I was really and truly sterile. Once again, I received the same results. I was at a loss because if I wasn't the father, then my wife was most certainly cheating on me. The medical procedures that she needed to conceive artificially were expensive, and since I was the only earning member between the two of us, she couldn't have gotten anything done without asking me for that sort of money first. So she was obviously cheating. The thought itself was so weird and horrible that I didn't do anything about it for the next few days while my wife planned a full-fledged party to announce her pregnancy. She seemed really happy, and I was equally shattered, but I couldn't let it show on my face because I needed to get to the bottom of this whole situation. I didn't even tell my own family about what was happening and kept it all under wraps because this was way too uncomfortable and personal to be shared with anyone. I couldn't even tell my wife what I thought because, firstly, way too much time had passed, and secondly, I wanted to know who exactly the father of her child was. Because if I did confront her, then maybe she'd just leave and I'd never know. Luckily, I found out on the day of the party itself. A lot of people attended, including our families, our friends, and a few of my co-workers. She also invited one of our neighbours who lived right across the street from us. Our neighbour, 27 male, is a young man and is definitely a lot better looking than me, no doubt. Not just me, but he's probably better looking than most people since he's a model. But he's still trying to make a name for himself in the modelling world. He moved in with his aunt, who owns the house he lives in, so that he's closer to the city since his own family lives really far away. My wife has always had a soft corner for this guy and would cook for him and his aunt when he moved in initially. He's even come over to our house for dinner a few times, and we've chatted about his work. He's well-spoken and well-read as well, and he's also a literature major like my wife, so they have a lot in common and hit it off instantly the first time they met. I never had anything against the guy since he seemed sweet enough, and I trusted my wife too. But when he entered the house on the day of our party and my wife's eyes lit up, I could sense that something had changed. She made a beeline for him as soon as he walked in, and they hugged each other for longer than she'd hugged any of the other guests. Nobody else seemed to notice this, but I did, and I could tell that they had something brewing. But I just needed a way to confirm it. So I decided to excuse myself to go to the bathroom, but headed to the bedroom instead and opened up my wife's laptop. I've been able to check her phone while she was asleep a few days after she told me she was pregnant, but I hadn't found anything suspicious. Getting to her laptop had proved to be a little more difficult, since whenever I was home, she was constantly watching something or typing something on it. Whenever I'd ask her what she was doing, she'd turn the screen away from me and tell me that she was working on her novel that had been going on for months. I respected her privacy because I'd actually thought that she was working on a novel. Now the situation had changed, and I was pretty sure that there was no novel and it was just an excuse to hide the contents of her laptop from me. Thankfully, there was no password or anything. I had easy access to it. After some digging, I was able to find another email account in addition to her real one. I switched to that one and went through the emails that had been sent and received. I went through those emails, and they were full of confessions of love from my wife and also the other guy, our neighbour. I recognized the email address since he was using his real name, and in the more recent emails, she was telling him that she was pregnant. He didn't take it kindly and was upset about it, so the emails stopped for a while, presumably because he wanted to end things. But my wife wasn't going to let him go. Eventually, I got the worst email of them all, where she was telling him that she'd spoken to a friend of hers who is a lawyer, and she'd help her file for divorce right after the baby is born. The reason she'd even tried to convince me to have a baby with her was so that she'd get both the alimony and the child support after the divorce, so that she could take off with our neighbour a few months after and live happily ever after. I was horrified when I read that, and I can still feel the nauseating feeling take over me whenever I think about that email. Anyway, I quickly shook off whatever I was feeling and got back to work. I took several pictures of the email on my phone before shutting it down and keeping it back where I found it. I was less concerned about the cheating and more disgusted by what my wife was trying to do. Cheating was one thing, but trying to trick me into having a child with her and then making me pay all that money, just so she could fund her dream life with her struggling boyfriend, was so psychotic. The cherry on top was that she was such a great actress that I hadn't suspected a thing. Yet her happiness was almost disturbing, but I was so angry about all of this that I decided to go the extra mile and take my revenge. I made up my mind to play along, and then dropped the bomb on her when she was least expecting it. There was no way I was going to let her just get away with it without feeling the hurt, betrayal, and frustration that I'd been feeling when I found out about her dishonesty. Call me a psycho, but I did what I had to do. So for the next 9 months, I played the perfect husband, father-to-be. It was tough knowing that she was lying through her teeth to me all this while, but the more she lied and pretended to be happy with me, the more it strengthened my resolve to see this through. I attended every meeting with her doctor and made sure she took all her vitamins on time and was the best husband that one could ask for. Then finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labour. I was extremely nervous because it wouldn't be in my situation, but I put that all aside and took her to the hospital all by myself. I'd called her parents already, but not mine since I didn't want them present there in case things became too dramatic. Anyway, her parents had to drive for an hour to get to the hospital, so we had some time to ourselves, and that's when I chose to drop the bomb on her. Once she was safely inside the room, I told her that I was going to go out and call our neighbour so he could be there for her. She looked taken aback and stuttered a bit, while saying that there was no need for that, and she didn't want a stranger in the room while giving birth. So I smiled back at her and showed her the results of my fertility test along with the divorce papers since I'd filed for divorce just a few days before her due date. I made sure to carry them with me on that day. She went through all of it, still looking confused, so I explained to her that I wouldn't be able to impregnate her even if I'd wanted to, so the baby wasn't mine. Then I told her about the emails that I'd found on her super secret account, and at that moment, she finally realized what was going on. The look on her face was priceless as I walked out and she struggled to come up with words. I thought I'd need to stay in the hospital myself too, because that's how fast my heart was beating. When I finally walked out, I called our neighbour up to inform him that my wife was in labour. I didn't even wait for his response and hung up as fast as I could. Then I got into my car and waited for my wife's family to show up. As soon as I saw her dad's car pull up in the driveway, I got out of there as fast as I could. I even turned my phone off for good measure and drove for a while until I got to this motel a little out of town. I packed my bags already a few weeks ago and had them stashed in the boot of my car so that I had all that I needed with me and wasn't caught unprepared at any point. I spent the rest of the day watching television, drinking beer, and doing everything I possibly could to take my mind off of things. I went to sleep that night quite peacefully, knowing that I was finally done and dusted with this whole act. The next morning, I woke up and finally turned my phone on. Naturally, there were hundreds of texts from my wife and my neighbour, none of which I bothered to even open. But I did go through some texts that my parents and brother had sent me. I guess my wife had probably contacted them when she couldn't reach me, so I decided to call my parents back and speak to them. I told them that I'd be coming back home in a while, and even told them to get my brother there if possible, so that I could explain the entire situation to them because they deserved an explanation for what was happening. I drove to my parents' house, and my brother was already there, all of them looking confused and kind of annoyed, which was natural because, to them, I just missed the birth of my own child. It also made them miss the birth of their grandchild, but I sat them down and explained the whole story to them and told them my reasons for what I'd done. By the time I was done telling them, they were speechless. I was ready to be bombarded with questions and accusations, but nothing of the sort happened. All my dad said was that he hoped nothing worse would happen, and if the others had any comments, they didn't say anything. So it was all chill on that front. That was a few days back, and while my family hasn't said much, my wife has gone above and beyond to accuse me of ruining her experience of becoming a mother for the first time. She's been trying to call me and text me ever since I left, but I haven't answered anything. Even my neighbour texted me a few hours ago, saying that my wife was really upset and that we should keep our differences aside for her sake, and at least try to sort things out with her for once. I can't believe the audacity that these people have, still trying to talk to me and make it seem like this is some petty thing that I'm getting pissed about. He mentioned a couple of other things as well in his text, like how my wife had started to fall back in love with me during her pregnancy, which had been a shock for both of them as well. So I should at least try to give our marriage a second chance. I call BS on it because if she'd started to fall for me again, then why was my neighbour still in the picture? I don't know why they think I'm that stupid. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about it. She's mostly angry that I've known everything right from the beginning, but had chosen to be with her and put up with this whole act, and accused me of lying to her for staying with my wife throughout her pregnancy and misleading her, despite knowing that the baby wasn't mine and she'd been cheating on me with our neighbour. And that's the end of part 1 of this story. What do you guys think about this whole situation? Do you have anything to say to the poster? Let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you guys on the next video.